Back in 1998, Telstra opened its office on the corner of Derby and Hunter Streets in what was described as a firm commitment to Newcastle.
It is a signal that we are here to stay in Newcastle and that the connection between Telstra and the Hunter is solid.
Well, that connection is now more shaky than solid, with 219 Newcastle workers grappling with an uncertain future, with their jobs to be cut by February next year.
Well, our members are obviously very shocked and very disappointed and very upset.
The CPSU believes it's corporate greed, with Telstra admitting that they're reducing costs to be more competitive.
Telstra is leading the charge as far as profitable companies are concerned, and here they are making 219 people redundant.
The telco is closing its call centres in Newcastle, Wollongong, Canberra and Launceston and restructuring its Sydney centre, cutting a total of 469 jobs.
We will be creating 260 new roles in the expanded centre in Sydney, and the staff affected will have the opportunity to apply for those roles.
Telstra says by consolidating 17 call centres to 4 major sites, they'll improve customer service and save $6.6 million in lease costs alone. But that's small change compared to CEO Sol Trujillo's pay packet of $8.7 million a year, plus a $1.5 million bonus.
Yes, it is obscene when somebody earns that type of money to take away an income from 219 families. It is obscene.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. The people who live in this Wentworth Street weatherboard cottage weren't home when their reverse cycle air conditioner, which had been left running, sparked a blaze in a rear bedroom. Neighbours called 000 after seeing smoke billowing from the home, and fire crews responded quickly, limiting the damage. It's a scenario that's all too familiar for firefighters who battle hundreds of avoidable residential fires during the winter months.
A lot of them are caused by electrical equipment. Over the summer period, dust tends to form on the electrical appliances, and this can cause arcing sometimes, short-circuiting.
Fire authorities are urging residents to discard faulty electrical blankets, clean lint out of the clothes dryer, not drape clothing over or near heaters, and refrain from overloading power points. It's also an ideal time to ensure potentially life-saving devices are on hand and working. They range from smoke alarms to home fire sprinkler systems.
With no protection or smoke alarm, you've got a 3% chance of survival in a house fire. With a smoke alarm, you've got a 52% chance of survival. With an active fire suppression system, it elevates your chances of survival to 94%.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Its right-hander is already known to surfers worldwide, but now Merewether could become one of only a handful of breaks around the country declared a National Surfing Reserve. Created under the Crown Lands Act, it would mean that surfing gets legal status as a primary use of the area, and Newcastle Council is right behind the push.
It gives it a status of national recognition. It also helps in getting funding because it puts an importance on the area, and it really demonstrates that on the national scene this is one of the best places to be surfing.
Mr Merriweather himself, four-time world champ Mark Richards, welcomes the move, but says it could place more pressure on the break.
I think most of our surf spots, and especially not just Merriweather, but all the town surf spots, like we're groaning under the pressure of numbers in the water. There's too few surf spots and really too many people surfing at the moment.
MR says if Merriweather, with its spectacular ocean vista, is to be declared a reserve, the derelict surf house needs to go to make way for a new family-friendly structure.
Surf House is located in what would be the National Reserve. Surf House is moving ahead in terms of being either refurbished or rebuilt. That decision is not made yet.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
If you feel anxious, worried, depressed, fearful, moody or regularly suffer tension headaches, the chances are you're stressed. The condition is becoming more widely accepted, but its trigger remains largely a mystery, prompting researchers from the University of Newcastle to question why what stresses one person may be of no concern to another.
To try and look at the differences between the resilient individuals and the vulnerable individuals, and think about ways in which we can help the vulnerable individuals to become more like the resilient individuals. And we're particularly interested in trying to look specifically at what brain mechanisms the resilient individuals possess that the vulnerable individuals don't.
The study has found that among humans, conflict is the biggest trigger of stress, but researchers are monitoring the behaviour of rats to see whether how an individual reacts to stress can reduce its effect on their health.
Whether you're talking about something like diabetes or rheumatoid arthritis, or even things like Alzheimer's, we now believe that inflammation of body tissues is a part of those disease processes. And because stress can essentially tweak up the inflammatory response, it can make all of those conditions worse.
If you find yourself in a stressful situation, such as an argument or being overworked, Professor Day recommends you respond actively but not aggressively. He says that remaining calm is the key, but warns those who internalise their stress or are prone to outbursts that they're damaging their health.
Researchers now hope to predict who is susceptible to stress and help people modify their behaviour so that they can become stress resistant. More information on the study is available on the HMRI website. Christy Carter, NBN News.
She's only 15, but Elizabeth Searle is already making plenty of noise. At last month's schoolgirl titles in Canberra, Searle beat a host of older players to win the singles crown and earn a prestigious place on the Australian merit team. Over the coming months, the teenager will juggle her hectic training schedule with international and national tournaments in Darwin and Gosford. Her sights firmly set on becoming a professional.
Big commitment to tennis, like doing homeschooling, and this is my second year doing that, so I'm pretty focused on it, so hopefully it goes well.
Sandy Knight could offer plenty of advice about the rigours of the sport, having recently returned home from a record-breaking college career in the US. The 23-year-old is now looking to add plenty of wins on Australian courts in order to turn pro. She says her college experience will be invaluable.
It's still a bit of a difference between going professional and playing college tennis, but it's so competitive that lots of people do it.
Making the switch from US hard courts to our synthetic surface will be tough, but this weekend she'll have her 17-year-old sister Danielle along to help in the doubles at a tournament in Foster. Sandy says she'll base herself in Newcastle as she plots a course for the professional ranks.
I've been to America for 4.5 years. I'd like to see some other places as well.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
We watched Aaron start here at 10 years of age, and he is to be a professional bowler, and that's what he is today. These people say they're getting loud to protect their quiet lifestyle. They call their patch God's Country, a pretty part of the Hunter Valley around Broke, Bulga, Milbradale and Forditch. But Sydney Gas has just put in a drilling rig at Bulga to look for methane reserves, and locals fear it could be the first of many.
There'll be 300 wells in this part of the valley. Now that's just going to make it look like an industrial eyesore.
Some landholders at Camden, south of Sydney, have been forced to spend tens of thousands of dollars in legal battles trying to keep Sydney Gas from muscling in on their family properties. Hunter people are worried they'll be next.
We fear the noise and the disruption and the loss of value of our properties.
Singleton residents have been put on to level 4 water restrictions, yet the water supply for this borehole that they're drilling here comes from the Singleton supply and could be up to 1 million litres. That just doesn't seem right.
The Hunter Bulga Gas Action Group is also concerned the drilling could contaminate local water supplies. But Sydney Gas told us today that their government-sanctioned tests are environmentally sound. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
If Newcastle Police have their way, no one will be admitted into a licensed venue in the CBD after 1 a.m. on Saturday or Sunday morning. The proposed lockdown is part of a comprehensive plan to reduce late-night alcohol-related violence. Professor Robert Clancy today voiced his support for the plan. He says a lockdown would reduce the pressure currently on the city's limited transport and police resources by people who loiter in the city after closing time.
This has been done internationally and shown and proven to be of value. It's an absolute nonsense for people to say that it doesn't work. It does work, but it needs to be done in a coordinated plan with other things in place.
But Professor Clancy says it's not just about curfews, better transport or more police. He wants more done to change the binge drinking culture of the younger generation. The professor says sporadic heavy alcohol abuse is just as damaging to your liver as daily intoxication.
We're now seeing in young people in the 20s and 30s the type of irreversible liver disease, cirrhosis of the liver, that we used to see and still see in middle-aged and older people. So people who are young are getting terrible illnesses.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
Even on a day as drizzly as this, the views from the eastern side of Moneybung Hill are pretty impressive. So it comes as no surprise that people want to build homes here. The area between Spears Point and Warners Bay is already spotted with a number of dwellings, but Lake Macquarie City Council's new urban design guidelines have the site earmarked for potentially 330 more.
That part of the city, there is very much a shortage of greenfield land, and so this certainly creates an opportunity to provide additional land for future housing.
The draft guidelines submitted to Council this week act like a blueprint for future use of the 115-hectare parcel of land. More than half of the eastern slope of the hill is likely to remain undeveloped to conserve native flora and fauna, with 5 kilometres of off-road walking and cycling tracks also part of the plan. With the nearby Pasminco smelter long gone, the semi-rural enclave has become prime real estate. In fact, part of the reason the guidelines were formed were because a group of landholders is looking to develop.
Their land is currently zoned what they call 10 investigation, which means it's been earmarked for future rezoning, and the idea of investigating that land is to determine how that land will be used.
Jessica Phillis, NBN News.
He's only been at the helm for 2 weeks and already Stephen Porges is enjoying the success of the Newcastle Permanent.
I feel like it's due to all the staff out there and it's got nothing to do with me, but it's a great way to start.
After being placed second for 2 years running, the Perm has now taken out the Building Society of the Year category in the National Consumer Finance Awards. The new CEO spent 8 years in New York working as the managing director of HSBC, but September 11 prompted a massive shift from investment banking to a simpler life, or so he thought.
We actually bought a farm over the internet shortly after September 11 and moved home, and I realised I wasn't a very good farmer, so moved back into finance again.
Holiday Coast Credit Union, which was founded on the mid-north coast and has branches in Maitland and Green Hills, has also been recognised. It was awarded Personal Lender of the Year, which is judged against all financial institutions across Australia. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Hardly ideal weather for the running of one of Newcastle's premier events, but organisers say the Paceway will be ready for the Guineas.
Look, this is a brilliant track in wet weather. Unfortunately, it probably takes away any chance of breaking the 3-year-old track record, which Second Dollar holds, but it doesn't matter, they'll still run quick time, it'll be a great race.
Maitland-trained horse Lively Exit will carry local hopes up against another quality 3-year-old Bold and Regal. In December last year, the pair went head-to-head on a rain-affected Newcastle track, with the Hunter horse claiming bragging rights. Unfortunately, one of Australia's current greats won't line up in the Guineas, much to the delight of the local runner.
He's been unlucky. He's run into probably one of the best 3-year-olds this country's ever seen in Lombo Pocket Watch, and I think he's been runner-up about 4 times to that horse.
If Lively Exit is first past the post, it will pass career earnings of $200,000, while a win for Bold and Regal would see it pass $140,000. The Newcastle Guineas scores up at 9:15 on Saturday night. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. Hardly ideal weather for the running of one of Newcastle's premier events, but organisers say the Paceway will be ready for the Guineas.
Look, this is a brilliant track in wet weather. Unfortunately, it probably takes away any chance of breaking the 3-year-old track record, which second dollar holds, but it doesn't matter, they'll still run quick time. It'll be a great race.
Maitland-trained horse Lively Exit will carry local hopes up against another quality 3-year-old Bold and Regal. In December last year, the pair went head-to-head on a rain-affected Newcastle track, with the Hunter horse claiming bragging rights. Unfortunately, one of Australia's current greats won't line up in the Guineas, much to the delight of the local runner.
He's been unlucky. He's run into probably one of the best 3-year-olds this country's ever seen in Lombo Pocket Watch, and I think he's been runner-up about 4 times to that horse.
If Lively Exit is first past the post, it will pass career earnings of $200,000, while a win for Bold and Regal would see it pass $140,000. The Newcastle Guineas scores up at 9:15 on Saturday night. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. They say it's lonely at the top, but for Ben Demery, this is the price of success. A condition known as optic atrophy robs the 20-year-old of perfect vision, meaning just getting to races and training is tough.
I rely on a lot of people. My family are great. They drive me to the gym and training and public transport every week to Sydney and things like that, so it does take a lot of effort and planning.
A rugby league player in his teens, Ben's condition soon led him to tandem competitive cycling. With his racing partner Sean in Sydney, Demery trains on his own through the week.
I go to Sydney Thursday, Friday, Saturday to train with Sean, my pilot, who lives down there on the velodrome, so pretty hectic routine, I guess, but it's worth it.
Identified as a potential star by Cycling Australia shortly after the Athens Games, Ben is enjoying a meteoric rise.
Over the moon, really. Trained pretty hard this year to get a shot at going to Worlds, which is obviously the big goal for the year, and to get there is just magic.
Ben travels to Brisbane in July for a training camp before flying to Bordeaux in August for the World Championships. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Thank you, Melinda. Well, it's been an amazing day here in Newcastle. Behind me on Nobby's Beach lies the wreck of the Pasha Bolka. She ran aground this morning. Her crew has since been airlifted off as part of an amazing rescue operation. And tonight, there's the real possibility she could break up and spill oil onto the beach. There's another ship in trouble as well, further north off Stockton Beach. The Sea Confident is being helped back out to sea by the crew of a tugboat from Newcastle. As you can see, the weather is still foul, and a decision will be made later tonight or early tomorrow on what can be done to salvage the ship. It's a sight to strike fear into the heart of every mariner and fascination for those ashore. The Panama-registered Pasha Bolka was due into Newcastle Harbour next week to load coal. Today, she came early, courtesy of a vicious southeast gale. The trouble began for the ship in the early hours of this morning. As the strength of the wind intensified off the coast, most of the coal ships waiting off Newcastle upped anchor and steamed further out to sea. But the Pasha Bolka couldn't get away. When these big ships don't have a cargo, they carry water ballast. And what we believe has happened is that this ship has inadvertently let go its water ballast, making it too high in the water for its propeller to work properly, and so it couldn't get out to sea to safer waters.
The ship, with its 22 Filipinos aboard, initially struck rocks just north of the Cowrie Hole between Newcastle and Nobby's beaches. It was jostled by wave after wave, crashing violently over its deck. With a strong southerly component in the wind, the stricken vessel bumped, dragged and scratched its way north along the rock shelf. With nervous eyes peering from windows on the bridge, the ship bumped clear of the rocks before coming to rest on the soft sand nearby.
I just watched it just come straight in with waves crashing over the side of it. It was unbelievable.
With the flat-bottomed vessel now fast on the sand, only 200 metres from the beach, the decision was taken to evacuate. 2 Westpac rescue helicopters worked in tandem for the operation. First, 2 crewmen were lowered to the deck to prepare the ship's company for the airlift. Then, one by one, in dangerous conditions, the men were lifted off. They battled gale-force winds, lightning and stinging salt spray.
Oh, it's horrendous. Like the wind's blowing down. Just trying to stay steady is, hard work, but trying our hardest and doing really well.
Were the men happy to see you?
Yeah, they were stoked, yes. Yeah. It's good to see them, smiles on the faces, but good to get out of there as well.
When each helicopter reached its capacity, the men were ferried back to Nobby's Park, appearing a little shocked but seemingly no worse off for their experience.
Remarkably, they are in a very healthy condition. They've all been assessed and I don't think anyone will be transported to hospital.
Meantime, just a couple of k's offshore, 3 other ships were facing a similar fate. The Sea Confidence ploughing full steam ahead into the wind, but going nowhere, managing to just hold its own against the wind and swell. At Nobby's, the production line continued, the rescuers battling the elements and the ship's crew being brought ashore steadily, with the captain the last to set foot on land. Westpac crewman Glenn Ramplin told of the difficult conditions.
The ship was still moving around a bit, but there's a lot of oil on the deck, and so it was just quite slippery, so we just had to be very careful. Plus the wind out there, it was quite easy to get blown off the hatch that we were on. Well, I don't really remember, but the Cygna ran aground the year I was born, so that's 33 years ago. So yeah, it doesn't happen every day, but yeah, it's be able to tell the grandkids.
The ship remains aground tonight, following a day both Newcastle and the crew of the Pasha Bolka will never forget. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It could spell an environmental disaster. 700 tonnes of fuel oil, 38 tonnes of diesel and 40 tonnes of lube oil are aboard the stricken Pasha Bolka, and there's already damage to the starboard side of the hull as the ship was driven onto the Newcastle coastline by gale-force winds and mountainous swells.
This is a full incident control to meet this very serious incident. And we have contingency plans at the moment being prepared for the possibility of any oil leaving these ships.
Plans are also afoot with a salvage team from port corporations across the east coast uniting in Newcastle for the emergency.
If this ship is in a reasonable state, we are hoping that the tugs, as soon as the weather calms, the tugs will be able to pull it off the bottom of the ocean.
But it could take a while, with Newcastle still in the eye of the storm. Conditions are deteriorating and the wind and swell is expected to worsen.
We've just had a reading of 17.9 metres of swell, which is an enormous swell sweeping across the entrance.
Thankfully, the crew is now safe, but the next concern is the extent of the damage to the ship.
It's too early to say whether it's going to be breaking up. The salvage people will be going on as soon as practical. They'll be out there making an assessment. Once that assessment's made, then we know what the next step will be.
The Ports Minister says a full investigation will be made into the decisions by the captain and the communication processes. Most of the 56 ships off Newcastle heeded the instructions and headed further out to sea to avoid the predicted severe storm conditions. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
Over decades, Newcastle residents have grown familiar with a flotilla of bulk carriers anchored in easy view of the coast. But to suddenly see one up close and helpless in the pounding surf was a spectacle that brought a flood of spectators. But as they trooped in, braving the lashing wind and rain, the same comment was repeated over and over. We've got another Cygna. Even those too young to remember when that ship went aground know about the rusting relic that's become an icon on Stockton Beach. Today's wreck, literally on the city's doorstep, was soon a must-see, and within an hour, city traffic was gridlocked by sightseers.
You can't get a park. I've walked down from at least the courthouse just to get here, and well, it's going to be here for quite a while, so it's going to be Newcastle's #1 tourist attraction.
For the most part incredulous, they watched as the ship, at first broadside to the rock shelf near Newcastle Baths, was washed steadily towards Nobby's Beach, its bow swinging until it was at right angles to the surf that streamed in towers of spray over the stricken vessel. From the air it looked almost as if it was trying to take a shortcut to the safety of the harbour. But now it's firmly aground in what ironically was approximately the river entrance before the Nobby's breakwater was built. Jim Sullivan, NBN News.
The wind was biting, and at Bar Beach the sand made it sting. Getting up this morning wasn't the real battle, it was getting to work. Conditions were downright diabolical.
Well, the last time we saw such an intense east coast low was when the Cygnet was pushed ashore, and we've had a similar fate with the Newcastle coastline at the moment.
The storm cut a swathe from Swansea to Scone, bringing down power lines on a day when it couldn't get much darker. By mid-morning, 14,000 homes across the Lower Hunter were without electricity, and Christchurch Cathedral without its historic Moreton Bay fig, planted by Newcastle's first Dean in 1900.
Well, the pressure of the winds have been more than 100 kilometres per hour. They gusted to around 54 knots off Nobby's, and they're now gusting that down towards the Sydney region, but they've been that for over 12 hours.
On Lake Macquarie, it was a wild ride, and that was just in the moorings. One yacht broke away while another boat was swamped. At Lovedale, 2 people were rescued when their cars were inundated. This unit at Lambton suffered the same fate. Businesses at Mayfield got instant water views. People were stranded in their homes, not that you'd want to go out anyway. The rain stopped briefly, but this is what it left behind. Tonight, the SES is asking people to be patient with resources stretched.
Even bringing teams in from other areas is very difficult because they're all flat out too.
And we'll be flat out forgetting a day like this. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
By 2009, Centennial Coal will be producing up to 10.5 million tonnes of coal a year from this site at Wybong near Muswellbrook, reaping $9.6 billion over 21 years. It's taken several years of community consultations and environmental assessments, but Centennial Coal finally jumped the final hurdle yesterday, with the state government approving the mine with 84 strict conditions attached.
Anvil Hill equates to potentially 10% of our future electricity requirements, and that's very important, obviously, for long-term electricity generation in this state.
But with climate change the hot topic and reducing greenhouse gas emissions a top priority, the timing doesn't bode well for the state government's green credentials.
It makes no sense for them to be approving these mines at a time when climate change is already having such a massive impact on communities here in the Hunter, in Australia and around the world.
But Centennial Coal says there are plenty of benefits, including a $25 million annual boost to the economy in wages alone.
Whether we like it or not, coal will remain part of the energy mix for another 50 years, and an Anvil Hill is an important part of that contribution.
Studies have been done to show that electricity can be provided by other means. We can have electricity without coal, we can have jobs without coal, but we can't have coal without climate change.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
It's reward for all his hard work, and now Nicky Carl can count himself among Australia's elite footballers.
His fitness levels have really gone up. He's worked so hard on the game. You can see that he thrives to play the game, he loves the game, and his attitude has always been fantastic.
Given his attacking flair, Carl is considered a key factor in Australia's Asian Cup campaign.
When I talk X Factor, that's probably Nicky Carl. You know, he came on against Uruguay the other night. He did extremely well.
Meanwhile, the Hunters' female Australian footballers have it all to do on Sunday against North Korea in Coffs Harbour. They must win to keep qualifying hopes alive for the Beijing Olympics.
The girls are really focused and determined because we have to win the game. You know, a lot of these girls that are here now haven't been to an Olympics, and it may be their only chance to go.
Knowing a win is a must, goals are essential, and the point isn't lost on striker Katie Gill.
I think it puts the team under a lot of pressure, but in saying that, I think we thrive under pressure, so it's going to be a very good and important game.
Deadly in earlier matches of the campaign, Gill scored 13 in 3 games. Just one on Sunday, though, may be enough to do it. Jim Callanan, NBN News. Only about 1 in 1,000 races like Sunday's duathlon get called off. Even in poor weather, they often go ahead. But no one budgeted on this. With the bulk carrier parked just off the race circuit, authorities have enforced a seclusion zone around the immediate area, which includes much of the race circuit.
There might be potential hazardous material there, and because it's right where we're having our race site, we've had to cancel the race because of this.
Logistically, it's impossible to organise an alternative course given the late notice, while competitors both from here and overseas have already begun arriving for an event that now isn't on.
Disappointing for Newcastle and for the competitors, and going to be a lot of unhappy people, and probably knowing our luck, it'll be a beautiful sunny day Sunday morning.
As for the other long weekend sporting events, this is about as far as any of the F1 powerboats are likely to get given the weather. They were scheduled to start racing on the harbour tomorrow. One event that is going ahead this weekend, rain, hail or shine, is on the Gold Coast, with the $100,000 Professional Bull Riders World Cup on the line, and Morpeth's Brendan Clark is one of the headlined acts.
It's going to be great being able to ride in front of my home country at the top level in what I do, because that doesn't, I mean, obviously it's never happened before.
If Black Friday was bad, conditions got a whole lot worse at night. Storms swept in from the ocean, driven by winds reaching gale force at times. Newcastle was a particular target, and conditions seemed to turn at the same time thousands of people began heading home from work. Those that could reach their cars rode their luck as streets became torrents. This motorist went from driving to floating in a matter of seconds, just one of the many caught in the rapidly rising waters. It wasn't the only one, as abandoned cars littered the city streets. Many swallowed where they stood. Power shortages to much of the area only added to the dramas as emergency services were stretched to the limit. Communication became almost non-existent as phone lines were filled and mobile phone services failed. Those who couldn't reach their cars did their best on foot as they waded to their homes, but that's where the floods took on a whole new meaning. Floodwaters poured into them, catching many by surprise as panicked residents struggled to find help in a city that was slowly being drowned. Backyards turned into swimming pools, but the rising waters didn't stop there. Kerry Hawkins did what she could to save household items in the sort of desperation mirrored in hundreds of homes across the region.
Started to light candles and everything, but that's all you can do. Just sit and hope and pray that I don't know what else there is to do.
This home just one of the many in Newcastle's inner city suburbs to be caught. Its occupants only moved in 3 months ago and rising waters forced a hasty retreat as new furniture lay soaked. Many residents were forced out altogether, housed in evacuation centres where they had to ride out the night. Businesses weren't spared either. Popular eateries that should have been full of diners were instead sweeping out the deluge. They, like everyone else, now left counting the cost of one wild night. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Dozens of cars which had been abandoned as the floodwaters rose last night were at daybreak strewn across city streets. The underground car park at the Junction Shopping Centre is now a 2-metre deep watery grave for 24 vehicles. These two were swept into a storm drain on Hamilton's Beaumont Street, their occupants lucky to escape alive. Homes didn't fare much better. In Merewether and Hamilton this morning, people who had to flee their homes returned. The terror of last night still vivid.
All of a sudden it just started to come through, and then as you start to try and save things.
Like many, this Hamilton couple abandoned their home when ankle-high water came flooding through. Today, the watermarks told the story of what happened in their absence.
The fridge is in the bedroom and there are dinner plates in the kitchen, and it's just unbelievable. Yeah. All my clothes are...
Yeah, all your clothes are ruined, aren't they? So
everything is
pretty devastating.
The television and the computer, and there's not one thing that's not wrecked.
But while the water has receded there, many homes in nearby Hamilton North are still flooded.
As you can see just around, everything's in other people's front yards or backyards.
I thought that I could just put towels under the door and stop it coming in, and now the watermarks are above my waist around the whole house. I can't believe what it's done.
It's devastating how quick it came in as well. You know, from 5 minutes it was just seeping under the door, and then the next minute it's coming through the floorboards.
The force of the water shattered glass shop fronts along Hunter and King Streets. Police were called to control looting at several stores in the early hours. Several abandoned ambulances also the target of thieves.
Some equipment appears to have been taken from an ambulance down in King Street. And if that's the case, obviously it's very, very disappointing.
The path of destruction stretched from the city to the lake. Cyclonic winds at Warners Bay felled power lines and trees along the lakeside esplanade. This house at Rankin Park also a victim of the gale. Tonight, Energy Australia is working to restore power to 150,000 Hunter and Central Coast homes. But it warns it could take a week, with this the worst damage our electricity network has seen for more than 30 years.
We ask people to be patient. We stress the safety aspects of fallen wires. Please stay away from those wires.
Christy Carter, NBN News. It didn't take long to go from the big dry to the big wet. The Hunter River broke its banks this afternoon at Largs near Morpeth, drawing a crowd of onlookers. The water has already risen past the 9-metre mark and is tipped to reach 11.3 metres at around midnight tonight at the Belmore Bridge. That will cause extensive rural flooding across South and East Maitland, with evacuations recommended in low-lying areas. Further up the valley, the SES is tonight moving around 100 Singleton residents to the town's community hall, the highway cut north of the town. The Hunter River is expected to peak there in the early hours of the morning. The SES says the resulting flood will probably isolate Singleton. Many low-lying properties are already inundated around Raymond Terrace, with the flood peak expected to arrive there tomorrow afternoon.
The declaration of natural disaster means that assistance flows immediately
to families, to individuals, to businesses and to farmers.
Christy Carter, NBN News. Storm and heavy rain was forecast, but no one could have predicted the chaos and mayhem that would follow. Police watched on, helpless as the water level continued to rise at Mardi. Parts of Gillaby were a no-go zone, but it was too late for this vehicle. The SES is tonight trying to find homes for hundreds of flood victims, all rescue resources already stretched to the extreme.
This is the biggest storm event we've had here locally. We've gone out of area to assist other areas during these large events. This is the first time Goss has been impacted with such a large storm and flooding event all at the same time.
Among the thousands without electricity, the Erina SES. As the generators kicked in, volunteers answered distress calls under makeshift lighting. Rescue crews warn some shallow water may appear safe, but the volume and pressure underneath can be very severe.
There's debris in the water. There's dangerous hazards in the water from sewer and just other dirt and debris. Keep out of the water.
Sarah El-Maselli, NBN News.
Thanks, Paul. Yes, 4 salvage crew members are on board and are likely to remain on the vessel overnight. Now, we can confirm that the ship's captain has been spoken to, but from what we can gather, it's only been about the ship itself and not about yesterday's events. Now, conditions down here at the beach are deteriorating, and we're told the Pasha Bulka will be around for another few days at least. Apart from being stuck in the sand, the Pasha Bulka appears, on the outside at least, to be holding up on day 2 of an unscheduled visit to Newcastle.
There hasn't been any splits or cracks in the vessel and leaks, and that's something that we do need to monitor.
A special heavy lift helicopter was flown in from Sydney. It lowered a salvage crew onto the bulk carrier during a rare break in the weather. When it landed, the team of 4 spent some time on deck before disappearing below into the ship's belly. They're armed with pumps, compressors, generators and hoses to carry out the initial inspection.
Where the fuel oil is, determining where it's located, where it can be moved.
As for the vessel itself, it's looking more like a breakwall as it continues to be lashed by the heavy seas. The Pasha Bulka has attracted a cult-like following, something that must be seen to be believed, a story to tell the grandchildren.
Because it's amazing. A big ship so close on the beach, it's just amazing.
I had to see it, so I thought I might come down and take a couple of photos. I just couldn't believe it.
Just getting to this part of Newcastle to see the stricken vessel is a feat in itself. If the streets aren't flooded with water, they're cluttered with cars, with the city's east end gridlocked. So the spectators walked, hundreds of them.
We've parked a fair way out and walked in, not to congest things.
Scores of motorists, though, tried their luck to get as close as possible, but much like the Pasha Bulka itself, they were going nowhere in a hurry.
We do need the roads for emergency services so that they can get out and do their job and do it without having to be hampered by onlookers.
But try telling them that. The ship, which made a memorable entrance into Newcastle, has captured the curiosity of an entire city and its surrounds, and for now at least remains an unlikely icon. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
You didn't have to look far this morning to see things weren't good, and once inside, it got no better at Knights headquarters. Confirming tomorrow's main game will go ahead at Energy Australia Stadium, staff will be kept busy for a while yet.
A bit of a mess around here. The roof came in last night and also flooding in the building, so a bit of disruption coming up over the next couple of weeks.
Last night, the weather for the South's Penrith game restricted the crowd to absolute desperates, and it was the Rabbitohs who revelled in it. All night they went to a heavy sky and mistakes rained in. Fittingly, it was a kick that helped settle the match. There were questions. The Panthers claim Merritt knocked on and Peachy didn't ground the ball, but the benefit of the doubt went to Souths, who snapped a 5-game losing streak with a 14-4 win.
I probably should say nothing. It's what I was told to do by my mother.
the irony of it is he's ended up in his grandma's driveway, and he only had about a kilometre to travel to his dad's house where he was to leave the ute to retrieve his own vehicle.
From a trickle to a torrent in no time.
It was in about 18 minutes. It went from a trickle to knee height, and then from then on it just got worse and worse, and within half an hour it was about 5 foot high.
Business owners and employees were left to salvage what was left among the debris. Not much was left untouched, this warehouse writing off almost $1 million in stock alone. The Wallsend Town Committee will meet with residents tomorrow night to offer support and advice, with almost 250 business owners and employees likely to feel a massive financial strain.
That'll be at Diggers, so anyone who has been affected, please come on down. We'll talk about how you can get assistance.
Clean-up crews were also hard at work to clear fallen trees elsewhere around Newcastle, including a massive roadblock outside Katara High. Blackbutt Reserve is a mess. Wild winds have ripped up hundreds of trees and spat them out in piles all over the park.
Blackbutt's a no-go zone for walkers, for visitors at this stage. We're doing our best, and we'll be working for a number of weeks to try and reopen.
Enclosures bore the brunt of falling trees, most of its aviaries destroyed. While the richly reserved picnic area is expected to be open to the public in 2 weeks, it'll be months before the park reopens.
And great swathes of open space now that's going to take many, many years, and Blackbutt certainly will never be what it was.
Alexandra Crowell, NBN News.
At the moment, the energy crisis is a never-ending battle. Every time power is restored in one location, another gap in the system is discovered. Energy Australia says it's about doing the job right, not necessarily quickly.
We've got to be mindful of our own people and their safety, as well as the safety of the public.
Technicians are working 16-hour shifts to restore power, but even with extra crews, some homes could be in the dark until next weekend.
Can't say that we'll have everybody back on by the weekend. We'd love to be able to say that, but the task is just so huge.
Health professionals are warning anyone without power to take extra care with food. Anything that's been defrosted should be consumed within 24 hours and never refrozen. Everything that comes into contact with floodwater, including children's toys, could potentially carry disease.
Everyone should treat the floodwater as contaminated, and that means very importantly that they really need to wear boots, wear gloves to make sure that they don't actually get up abrasions and so on that could be infected.
Experts are also encouraging people who are overly stressed to keep in contact with friends and relatives.
These reactions are extremely normal. This is what everybody goes through when they're in any sort of stress.
If the condition doesn't improve, residents should consult a GP. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
No gold at the end of this rainbow. Just one big ship which isn't going anywhere for a while yet. Assisted by some of the Pashabolka's crew, the nation's leading salvage team continued to assess the stricken vessel today and not only found it to be in a stable condition, but managed to return power. Salvage operations, though, remain as dynamic as the weather, with scenarios being drawn up tonight as they source internationally for more equipment and personnel.
We need to understand that success isn't necessarily measured in the first attempt. There may be an attempt for the salvage process, and it may require a second and third attempt.
While the time frame for any successful salvage is important, what is crucial is that the right plan is employed.
The risk of environmental spill is clearly foremost in our mind.
The weather was an obvious contributor to all of this, but the Australian Transport Bureau has launched an investigation all the same.
The results of that will be critical, but the main focus at the moment for the response team is the response.
The crew of the Pashabolka were rescued in dramatic scenes on Friday, with the Westpac rescue helicopter crews bravely winching them to safety in horrendous conditions. But even they have their own flood story. 12 crew and some staff were trapped at their own base as floodwaters poured through on Friday night.
We had about 2 foot in the operations building and 3 foot in the administration building.
Forced to salvage what they could, they're dealing with the clean-up while still flying rescue missions around the clock.
All the guys have been fantastic. Engineering have kept the machines up and running. All the pilots have volunteered their times, crews are in. We've got 3 actual helicopters on the go at the moment.
In fact, all the emergency services have suffered. Police, ambulance and the State Fire Brigade have either lost vehicles and equipment or had much of it damaged. But still, they're hard at it. With clean-up operations continuing and rising water still threatening, that work will go on for some days yet. Jim Callanan, NBN News.